This podcast is part of the How We Are network. For information on this episode and many other like-minded shows, visit howweare.org. That's HOWWEARE.org.
Greetings and salutations, everybody. You are listening to 100 Words or Less, the podcast, and I am your host, Ray Harkins, eternally grateful for you hanging out with us, with me, and with my guest this afternoon, evening, whenever you are listening to it. I'm recording this on the morning of June 20th, which is actually the day that I go to Warped Tour. For those of you that don't know what Warped Tour is, first of all, get out from under that rock. I think this is my, I want to say 14th or 15th year in a row. It's one of those things where every year I'm like, oh, I don't know, like maybe there's not a reason for me to be there in regards to my professional working life, and there always is. There's always a reason to be there. Honestly, at the end of the day, I enjoy it. It's fun. It's fun to be able to see some friends all kind of in a concentrated area. Granted, it's usually hot as hell. Today I'm going to Pomona, which is going to be, I think, in the mid to high 80s. So I need to put some sunscreen on and make sure I don't die. If you are sweating in the sun currently as you are listening to this, I empathize with you. I feel what you are going through because I am going through that today. The guest this week is Sean Ingram. He is the vocalist for a band called Coalesce, which, if you have not been listening to in June, I have been having people on the show that I define as legendary luminaries, people who are highly influential within the context of independent music and more specifically punk, hardcore, whatever you want to call it. Let's get some business out of the way first, and then we will talk about Sean and Coalesce and how awesome that band is and how great of a dude he is. Anyways, so for those of you that paid attention to the month of May, it was a huge fund drive. I defined it as successful. I mean, if someone gave $5, I would have been like, cool, that's successful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Granted, I had high expectations, and honestly, those weren't met, but I was shooting for the stars. I'm glad that we landed on the moon. So I'm very, very pleased to thank some of these people. Jacob Ray. He is a person who donated so graciously to the show at a contributing rate of, I can't remember how much, because that's irrelevant. But he said, every month, I will be giving you this money. And I really, really, really appreciate that. So thank you, Jacob. Trevor Barrett? I'm butchering your last name, and I apologize. But you've been interacting with the show a lot recently, and I am pumped on Facebook, on Twitter. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you for giving a crap about what is being put out there. And yeah, for those of you that are also interested, the donation link is on the right side of the page of the website, 100wordspodcast.com. I put up a donate button for people who are just like, hey, I can't give you money each month, but I just want to give you like a lump sum donation. No joke. And this is someone I would be thanking in a later episode. Someone gave $100. I couldn't even believe that someone would do that. It's just, I don't know, it gives me warm fuzzies because after all, this thing is free and you vote with your dollar. So basically what I'm saying is that, so if you are deciding to go to a movie, that is you investing in that movie. As much as you might not think that, oh, just whatever, I'm paying to see a movie, I'm doing something, but that is a choice. And so for people who give money to this show in order to make it better, I'm eternally grateful. Donate is all I'm saying. There's an option for those of you who are like, I can't do this every month. Visit 100wordspodcast.com. Check out the right side of the page. And there's buttons. There's a button you can donate. Super simple. propertyofzach.com. Great media partners. Visit them. Review the show. Visit the website as well. And you can see, I think I put up a link somewhere where you can review the show. But regardless, go to iTunes. You can drop some stars, say some nice things. People have been doing that recently, and I love to get that feedback. And it's really nice because people, generally speaking, leave us the show 5 stars, and that's awesome. So the more rankings that we get, the more professional we look, the easier it is for guests to understand that, oh, this thing's legit. It's not just like some, it's not just Ray doing this little cute thing in the corner by himself. So anyways, that is the thing. So do that. And email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. I've been having a lot of great discussions about guests and just other random topics of conversation. I don't care when you listen to these episodes. Like, I got an email from someone who was like apologetic that they are listening to an episode that got released in February. I'm like, I don't give a shit. It's awesome. Like, whatever I said back then is more likely than not still relevant, still talk aboutable. Don't feel bashful. If you're listening to this months and months, even years after the fact, email the show. It's fine. I'll be doing this forever. Hopefully, maybe. So, Sean Ingram, like I said, the vocalist for the band Coalesce. And Coalesce, there's a kind of a Mount Rushmore as far as like sort of metallic hardcore bands are concerned. And honestly, Coalesce would probably belong on there. It like Converge is another band. Dillinger Escape Plan, arguably so. And then they're all like, you can go a million different directions with it. But anyways, but Coalesce and Converge, I mean, those are like absolutely monumental bands that pushed the boundaries of what hardcore and metal were. And especially Sean Ingram, like his voice is so distinctive, and what he did with that and the band just really, it was challenging in so many respects. Like I remember not understanding Coalesce for a long period of time. Like I remember getting Give Them Rope, which is a seminal release from them. And I listened to it and I was like, I don't get it, man. And this is when I was maybe about 17, 18 years old, maybe. So I just it could not compute. Later on, I got into them, and after I saw them live, I was like, okay, I really get what they were doing. But Sean has started a successful business. He runs a company called Blue Collar Distro. They do a lot of online merch stores. They print a lot of merch and other goodies for bands and comedians, and he's been able to parlay his knowledge within the context of his band into a career, which is awesome. So he decided to take some time out of the day, speak to me over Skype, and just couldn't be more. I hate to say down to earth because like I didn't expect him to be anything but that. But he just says something really compelling that kind of hit me towards the tail end of our interview. So listen to that, see if you can pick up on that, and I will talk to you after we are done. So I want to say it was, let's take you back to 1998, I want to say.
Okay.
I think that is when you guys were touring with Today is the Day. And you played Showcase Theater in Corona, California here, because I'm based in Southern California. So I ditched out on a biology final. But when I say ditched out, I mean like I didn't study for it. I didn't care about it because you guys were playing with Today is the Day. And that was my first time because the couple times before when you guys came through, and I think you played Coos Cafe before that.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was. I had just missed starting getting into music by a year or two. I wasn't a metal kid. I was a hardcore kid, and so like showing up at Today is the Day show, being like, "Huh, this is weird. Like, what's happening with?" I see the reason why Coalesce is touring with a band that is heavy and loud, but that was like one of the first shows where I distinctly remember being like, huh, there's two types of people that go to shows. Like I could see the kind of hardcore kids, and I could kind of see the metal kids.
Yeah.
Because you guys never really, in my mind, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys never really made that full quote unquote crossover to where, yeah, you picked up, I'm sure, a few people from doing tours like that, but
that stuff all happened way after us. Just the notion that you could be in a band like Coalesce and make a living at it was just so absurd at the time. So when, like after 99, and we started seeing other bands like on TV and stuff, MTV and things like that, it just kind of blew our minds that someone was able to monetize it. Because in our mind, that kind of music would never be monetized. So that was, never the goal. You just did it because you love it. As far as like the full crossover thing, our whole thing was like, especially with our splits and everything, we just always wanted to be associated with all sorts of people. I mean, that's why we did a split with Get Up Kids. Gosh, there's another, I can't remember the name of the band off the hand, but it was on Hydra Head Records.
Boy Sets Fire.
Yeah, Boy Sets Fire. Sorry.
That's
terrible.
fine.
I can't remember the band's name. But we did split with them. But we also did a split with Napalm Death. So, like, to us, we wanted to be associated with, like, all sorts of different things. To us, like, I think music, like the whole hardcore scene, like the straight edge hardcore scene, and that type of stuff, that wasn't us. And that wasn't where we came from as a band. I mean, I came from that. But but the other guys did not, So I think they always wanted to be known more as like an AMREP type band rather than the type of like hardcore and metal that we got into, or I guess what people associate us with and such. But as far as like seeing the different groups of people, yeah, I think we did towards the end there. But man, you have to realize it's like, 20, maybe 100 people would come out to those shows back then. You know what I mean? So it's like, we're happy to see any people, so it didn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
that was like kind of towards when, it was kind of like, towards like, the Chicks Up Front thing was happening at that time and everything, the Red Girls and all that type of stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I think back then, people were more vocal about wanting to see girls at shows rather than like the type of scene you were from. You know what I mean? It's like, it was an open forum and everyone was welcome. So, but I do know what you're talking about, but I think that all totally happened after us. Cause see, we broke up in 99 and then did something in 02. And from 99 to 02 was the difference between, like $50 a show to multiple $1,000s a show because the scene had just exploded. It was just wide open. Unfortunately, we missed like a lot of the bigger shows and the hype and the stuff like that. However, we did get to play that amazing fest that Scion put on.
Yeah.
And Atlanta, which is like one of the most insane things ever. They like flew all these totally weird death metal bands and like from God knows where they flew these people in.
Yeah, no, I flew out to that. I saw you guys at that, and because
show was fun. Yeah, that was like an amazing show, and there was so much going on. But like I remember right before our show, I went to go use the restroom, and there was some band that like I know Scion spent thousands of dollars getting these guys over there, and there were seriously like 10 people watching them because there's so much craziness going on. That, in our mind, that festival would be packed everywhere, but it really was like a mass migration. Converge is playing, let's go. Neurosis is playing, let's go. It was just like this herd of people, as I'm sure you probably remember since you went there.
I mean, especially like in watching the 10-year lapse of time between when you guys, stopped actively touring and then started to do the spot dates, which you guys did, which you guys obviously continued to do now. It is one of those things where it's like, now it's obviously common for people to, listen to basically every style of music possible, just because it's like, I think there's just like two different classifications. There's like independent music and kind of everything else. And there's no delineation between that. No one gives a shit about the huge divisions that obviously were created when the scene was like still trying to figure itself out.
Yeah, and there's just so much music.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much. God damn, when MySpace, first blew up, I remember just looking at all those bands. It's just like you don't have to do anything to be in a band anymore. You just got to start a page and hope someone discovers you. You know what I mean? There's no getting out on the road, and it's like there was so much noise. I remember looking through it. It's just like, how can you possibly even stand out? Now, back in the 90s, like in 93, 94, when we first started, there was a lot of hardcore bands, but there were not thousands of hardcore bands. You know what I mean? It wasn't the same kind of thing. So we chat about that every once in a while. We're curious if it's just the technology, with the Macintosh and, or the PC software and stuff as that's happened. Because again, when we were doing that back in the day, there was no internet. There were no cell phones. We had dialers, that you put up against the thing, for long distance calls, and we had, maps.
Yeah.
Like
atlases.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like technology really did change a lot of that, and I feel like it really opened up, gosh, just an insane amount of bands and an insane amount of genres. You know what I mean? And like even hearing you say, metal and hardcore, it's like there's now like multiple like versions of hardcore.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And there's like at least 15 types of metal.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas like even back then it was like metal hardcore.
Yeah.
When we first did that first 7-inch on the single series for Earache Records, our entire thing was that we wanted to be on a metal label just because we wanted to. It was different. And I remember Scott from Blood That being like, dude, you're like the first one to do this. This is amazing. And it's like, it means nothing today because it's like you have metal labels that are doing all sorts of stuff like that. You know what I mean? And vice versa,
Well, yeah, no. The years that I worked at Century Media Records, it was one of those things where where I started working there in like around 2002, and it was one of those things where we kept in touch with the Turmoil guys, and it was the same sort of idea where it's like they had no place being on that label, and no one at the label had any idea what to do with that band. It was only until, like you said, it was years later where it was like, oh, I guess I get where they're coming from now, as opposed to like, oh yeah, what are we doing in '97? Who fucking knows?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember Turmoil was definitely one of the big ones too. That was on Century Media. Were they the first hardcore band in Century Media?
You had random ones like Rikers from Germany. You had ones that didn't really make an impact here in the States. Between Turmoil and like Only Living Witness, those were kind of the bands that were like, oh, this isn't kind of your typical long hair metal, so to speak. Yeah. You hit the point in regards to the low barrier of entry. Once people had more of an access to stuff, that's obviously what propagated millions of bands existing. The notion that I always find so quaint and telling of that time frame too is that even in the later 90s, like I started going to shows around 96 or so I only had pictures of bands that existed either in zines or obviously on layouts. So it's like you guys, for example, it's like I only had a very, very vague knowledge of what you looked like, and then when you guys show up, I'm just like, oh, so that's what they look like. Like, a bunch of dweeby looking guys. Like, okay, I get it.
I remember that. I remember the first time I saw a picture of the Bad Brains, I was like, wait, they're black? I didn't know that. And yeah, no, you're totally right. And then, especially tell me if you used to do this. I'm looking for a new band, so I'm going to look at the thinks list on the band my current favorite band.
Yep.
And that's how we found all those other bands. You know what I mean? It's like that was it. The thinks list was like so important.
Yeah.
To figure out like who was in the same genre, because there was I didn't live in New York.
Right.
So I don't know who any of those people are. I don't talk to anybody over there. There's no, I mean, that thinks list was like the closest to like, an advertisement of what's cool. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And I remember that being a really big deal when we stopped doing thinks lists on Coalesce Records. I remember having that conversation with Jess, and I was like, dude, the internet, okay, it's over. People find their own bands. You know what I mean? It just seems so silly.
Yeah.
It seems silly having a thinks list now with like a bazillion bands on it and stuff. It's like, but back then that was so important because they're like, please put me on your thinks list, Ray Capo or whoever, because I want, Joe Schmo and, Kansas City, Missouri to buy my record and experience me too,
No, totally. And I remember how important it was, and it still is to a certain extent. If you get up on stage and Coalesce is going to play a show, if you, Sean, decide to wear a Neurosis t-shirt, that advertisement of that endorsement is like ringing. You're like, oh, dude, I've never heard of that, but what's that shirt he's wearing? What's that? Yeah. What's that thing? I got to find out.
That still exists today. I sent a link on. I have a fake Facebook account that I do marketing on for this bike project that I do.
Okay.
And one of the guys, for some reason that I added, he liked some new supergroup with members of Mastodon.
Oh yeah, Killer Be Killed, I think.
Yeah, Killer Be Killed. Yeah, that's the one. And the Dillinger Escape Plan guy, the new singer, or the singer of Dillinger Escape Plan, he had Portishead shirt on. Uh-huh. And I'm looking at 300 comments from "This band sucks" to take all my money, or someone pimping their own stupid band that
mm-hmm.
he recorded himself. And then, but the biggest comment on that whole thing when Mastodon posted that was, "Cool shirt. I love this shirt." You know what I mean? And then going on, it's like, I'm going to check it out now. It's like, seriously?
Right.
It's 2014. You know who Portishead is? It's like super insane. And I think I'm pretty sure Portishead is who was on it, but
yeah.
But it was I think it also too was the contrast between like how heavy a band that is, or how rocking the band is versus like how austere Portishead is in comparison. But
yeah. No, for
but
sure.
Yeah, no, that totally reminded me of that, because I remember looking at that and just being like, that is the most so insane. And I ended up just skimming the whole section, looking at the comments, and like, of what people say. And I was also surprised too, like how it seems like lately, I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe it's not. I hope it's true. But it seems like the whole, like everyone's a troll on the internet on any kind of musical thing, any kind of music, band coming out or new
mm-hmm.
project. It seems like it's like really toned down a lot too. Because I remember being on Lambgo
Oh,
and, like car flip, van flip, whatever, all the whole thing, that they would do. I remember it was just like a contest to see how like ruthless and just like horrible you could be to people,
yep.
and so I just checked out of it, like I guess it would probably be '08. I just checked out, and I didn't want anything to do with any of it, because it didn't make me feel good, even whether it's directed at me or somebody else. It's just, I don't like it, so I don't need that in my life, and so I just left it behind. So seeing that now, after not looking at those types of blogs and stuff, I was really surprised. Are you seeing that too, or do you think people are still, out to destroy everybody's creativity, no matter?
Yeah, no matter what. No, that's a very good question. I think it proliferates just because there's so many places in which you can share your opinion from that perspective. I mean, I think that the lowest common denominator would be looking at like YouTube comments. I think that's where I think you could look at the correlation between people that were posting on Lambgoat, that it would be the amount of hate that's poured on something. For every 20 negative comments, you have one positive comment. But yeah, I just think it's like it proliferated all over the internet. So it's like maybe we just don't see it in one concentrated area. You made me think about something else in regards to, kind of like not the origin story of Coalesce, so to speak, but like, I mean, it's been well documented and you've spoken about it in many interviews in regards to the experience that you had, obviously. Did you move from Kansas City to Syracuse and then back to Kansas City?
Oh, yeah, I don't think I've actually ever talked about that.
Yeah, because I don't know where you were born and raised. Like, it's one of those things where it's like,
well, yeah, Kansas City, and then as a kid, I lived in Norman, Oklahoma, and then we moved back here to Kansas City, and then was actually put in school a year early. So I graduated when I was 17.
Okay.
As soon as my parents were going through a divorce, and as soon as I was done with school, I was just basically like, I'm out of here. I want out of here. I don't want to be here. There was, I can't remember. I think it was Holocaust magazine. Jen and Chris, I think that's their names. But it was 127 Harvard Place. It was across the street from 129, which is from Guav Conviction Records, who put out the first Earth Crisis 7-inch.
Yep.
And I just through zines and literally writing handwritten letters with stamps and everything to these people. I just kind of befriended them and stuff. I was like, hey, look, I'm just looking to move. And they're like, well, we have a room. It's this much. I was like, well, shit, that's as good a place as anywhere. So, I remember it was the day after Christmas. Actually, I think it was Christmas Day. I just packed all of it. I was like, all right, I'm out. Packed everything up, and I just drove there overnight and got a job at Office Max.
Oh, yeah.
And just went to as many shows as possible. It was a really interesting experience, I would do it again. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't tell myself not to do it, because I learned a lot from that experience, especially like how to deal with people, how to deal with extremes.
Right.
And just honestly, just how to deal with yourself, and, and just like your job and like a career, and like planning for family, and like getting a life plan, I think that was one of the darkest times of my life. Well, not because of straight edge or shows or job or anything, but there just was no future. There was no plan. There was just nothing. Mm-hmm. There were no roots, and that was like, I didn't realize how important that was. I'm sure for some people it's no big deal, but for me, I just couldn't move someplace anywhere and make a go of it. It's like I had to have those roots, and family support and stuff. I was out there for, I want to say 4 months, maybe.
Oh, geez. That's not a very...
not long at all.
Yeah, the way that you were speaking about it definitely made it sound like, it was like maybe a good year or two before you realized how low it got.
No. I was only out there probably, probably about 4 months and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have my act together, and I was living with a bunch of hardline, vegans.
Right.
Literally read the ingredients list on, or read anything on the back of, when I come home with my groceries to make sure that I'm, vegan enough and stuff. So yeah, it's real. It was just real wild. It was just a very oppressive type of thing, that I got myself into, and it was my own fault, because I can't fault them. They didn't misrepresent themselves. They were Syracuse hardline vegan people, so it's my own fault. I thought that was me. I was 17, it's like, right. This is what I wanted to be, it's like, look, I want to be socially conscious, I care about the animals. All this whole thing, it's like what I want to be a part of, so I threw myself into it 100%. But it just did where it wasn't me, you know. I discovered really quickly that that was not the type of environment for me. So I did move back to Kansas City. And then it was weird because almost like the day I came back, I went to a Coalesce show when they had like a different singer. It was a different band, but it was essentially Coalesce. And it was just like, okay, Sean's back, so he's joining the band. Let's go. You know what I mean? And it was like that was like kind of a real surreal experience too, because it felt right when I got home. All the pieces fit immediately as soon as I got home, whereas everything was jumbled and you know, a lot of hurt feelings and misunderstanding and all that stuff when I was out there.
I mean, at that age, everybody is kind of trying to play a character that you read about or you get exposed to.
Well, or who you want to be. You
Right.
know, so I want to be like Ray Capital. I want to be like Carl Beecher. I want to be Ian. Yeah, no, you're totally right. And I have a 16-year-old right now. To me, holding the ridiculous things that she says to me sometimes against her, like it's weird to think that I was that age when I was out there, that my daughter is now. And it's just like, I wouldn't hold a single thing against her because she's just trying to find herself, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why it was always so wild, you know what I mean, that, you know, Sean sold out when he was, you know, 19, 20 or whatever, you know what I mean? It's just like I was a kid and all those other people were kids too, you know? And it's just wild to take it like so seriously, like on like a life-threatening level.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just been a real big curiosity in my life. And sometimes I almost forget it ever happened, you know, and then I'll do an interview like this and it all comes rushing back. And it's like, man, I remember we couldn't play Salt Lake City. I remember promoters calling us on the phone saying I'm being intimidated by or Monster Crew or whoever, you know, whoever the crew was at the time. And I remember being like, wait, what's a crew? What are you guys talking about? You know, and then it comes out that police in these areas were treating crews like actual gangs, you know, because they were intimidating people and hurting them and destroying property and things like that. So it really is surreal because I don't think that stuff exists anymore. I feel like money took all that stuff away. It's like there's money in this now. You know, it's been monetized, so it's not dangerous anymore.
I honestly never thought about it from that perspective, but it is interesting because it's like I definitely remember I tried to get into Give Them Rope, but I just didn't. I didn't understand it. My brain couldn't comprehend it. And then Functioning on Patience was when I started to really, you know, dive into what it was that you guys were doing, and it was like because it was very clear in the lyrical perspective that you were sharing all those emotions that you're just talking about right now, and it like I mean I was straight edge and I still am straight edge, but it was one of those things like I always approached it from a very, I mean, for lack of a better term, like confrontational standpoint. Like, you know, you do you, I'll do me. You know, as long as you're not hurting yourself, then like but it was, you know, I definitely felt that emotion that you were trying to convey of just like there needs to be balance in this perspective that you're trying to share, because ultimately this lifestyle that is being led, no matter what it is, whether it's straight edge veganism, you know, philosophically speaking, religiously speaking, if people look at it and are like, oh, that doesn't look cool. Like that looks like you said, the word oppressive is totally true. And no one's going to want to do that from like a long-term perspective. If it's like, oh dude, this is like not only is it work, but this is like, I'm getting judged constantly. Like, why would anybody want that?
Yeah. I a lot of times, you know, I compare it to like, it is kind of like a pseudo religion. You know, it's there's not a lot of differences from like, you know, an evangelical like type Christian setting, you know, being judged constantly and all that, you know, in that setting. Two things about that though. My buddy Dan Askew, the guy who owns Second Nature Records, that dude's been straight edge since day one. I've never seen that dude drink in my entire life. I've never heard him cuss in my life ever.
Right.
And he's still straight edge and he's still vegan to this day. I mean, it's his thing. It's awesome, you know, like nobody faults him. When I go out to eat with him, I'll go to vegan restaurants. I love vegan food. I love all that stuff. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't have like a hard feeling towards it. But as far as like how some people like have balance and stuff, Jess always compared it like this. He says it's like it's like taking a beach ball and pushing it. The harder you push, if you slip once, you know, it just bursts out, you know, and it just explodes. Whereas if you have balance, you know what I mean, you can hold it under control. It's very similar like that. And I feel like, you know, Dan was very much balanced, you know what I mean? It's like he didn't X up or, you know, have a million vegan t-shirts, you know. Right. He wasn't the guy in the room who entered the room and let everybody know he was vegan. those types of things, whereas like I was very different. It's like, oh, I'm vegan. I'm starting a vegan this, I'm doing a vegan that,
Right.
it's like I'm militant, and it was just, I was doomed to fail from the very beginning.
Yeah.
It's no different than when someone does the same thing. I feel like I'm a Christian. I'm doing this, like, I don't know if you've seen the documentary Jesus Can.
Oh, yeah.
But they have like those kids and stuff. That's actually just here. That's like 20 minutes from me. And gosh, WBC is like 20 minutes west, so I'm like right in the middle of like,
Extremists. Yeah.
extremists on both ends, from the evangelical world. But those kids are doing the same thing, you know what I mean? They're just pushing it so far, you know what I mean? And like, I just really hope somebody will do the documentary follow up to that, 6 years after that. I just want to see where those kids are at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, to me, that's the interesting one. You know what I mean? It's like, I already know what it, you know what I mean? Because it's like, that's what everybody does,
Yep.
when they're young and they do things like that. So
What was your family structure like as you were growing up? Like you said your mom and dad got divorced when was it around 17 that they were getting divorced, or was it a few years before that?
That's probably a few years before that. They, it was a good family, middle class, suburb, South Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
They seemed happy, but there was like a point in time my dad went through a very stereotypical midlife crisis, got the little convertibles. I mean, just the whole thing, just a textbook, and his infidelity really affected me and it affected our family like really poorly. It made my sister mad and it made me sad because I didn't understand why, like even at like, I guess it started like, their divorce lasted a very long time. They got back together, yada, yada. The real divorce happened like when my mom finally had enough, So I want to say this all started when I was in 7th grade is when it first started happening. So,
are you an only child, or do you have brothers and sisters?
I've got an older sister and I've got a younger sister. So
Okay.
I'm the middle child. So it just affected everybody, and to me, like he did that. It was like he cheated on me. You know what I mean? Because he had some girlfriend and she had a son and he was buying him like all these, like toys and games and fireworks stuff that I was told, fuck you, I'm not buying that. It costs money. Those types of things. So it was like really weird to see that because it really was like he was cheating on the family because he kind of like accepted another family. So that caused like a huge rift before us, but I was completely into skateboarding at that time. So, me and Dan from Second Nature, I mean, we were hardcore skaters. That's all we did. And at that point, I was just old enough that I had some friends that were older than me that had cars, and it was all about skating vert. That's all I did was skate vert, for like those like next 3 years and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a town south of Grandview called Raymore Peculiars is the name of it. Anyways, there's a vert ramp that a buddy of ours had out there, and then that's where we, that's where when we met like Dennis McCoy and Rick Thorne and all that skated their ramps with them and stuff. I mean, that's just really rooted in not wanting to go home, get out of the house. It's like you get your clothes and you get the hell out of there because you don't want to hear your mom crying and you don't want to see your dad's.
You want to escape. You need
forget about your problems and stuff like that. I never cried over it or anything. It's just, it was just one of those things to where you're just like, I don't want to be here. I'm going to go do my own thing.
Right.
You're really selfish when you're about that age anyway. So it really worked out, But that also like led to why I got so hardcore into straight edge and stuff is because the guys I was hanging out with, dude, I was doing drugs when I was like 13, 14,
Mm-hmm.
I just was, I was dropping acid. I was drunk all the time. We would skate all day and then we'd drink all night. I wouldn't even, as a kid, I wouldn't even tell my mom where I was, and just call her like 3 days later, just like not even come home, just be skateboarding, like that, and I was way too little for that. If my kids,
you would kill your children.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that's just how extreme I went in that way, and honestly, the whole straight edge thing was swinging back the other way, but it went too far. And I remember being completely wasted on some drink called Cisco. It was just absolutely horrible stuff.
Uh-huh.
And tripping on acid too, and just literally stepping outside of my body and seeing myself and being like, what the fuck is wrong with you? This is ridiculous. And it was the next day that like I just stopped hanging around with those dudes, and I knew what straight edge was, and I just, because the BMX guys were always straight edge, like Rick Thorne and Woody and Dennis McCoy. Those dudes were always straight edge. Those guys, introduced us to like all that CBGB, matinee type stuff. They were selling us their records, that they bought when they were out there. So anyway, so that's how I discovered it. And I just really threw myself into it too much the other way, basically.
I presume most of this, with all this as well, you had no passions beyond like school or sports. You were just basically like, I like skating, and then obviously music was opening up to you.
Well, I was always an entrepreneur, but my parents never recognized it. And I loved starting businesses and working businesses and forming them. I loved to design and create products so much. I tell you,
what was some of the earlier stuff that you were doing? Because I definitely identify with that, where I was like, just to give you a random example of a scheme, because I call it a scheme because when you're in like elementary school and even junior high, like you don't have no fucking clue what you're doing. But I remember it was like, I don't know, 4th or 5th grade, I definitely got the idea to sell like whatever, 8x10 glossies of what that you could essentially print out from like your home printer of, a sports star, and then have my mom sign it like, oh, cool. Here's Ryan Sandberg from the Chicago Cubs. Like, and I made up some elaborate story that like my dad got the autograph somewhere, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll sell it to you for $10. And then I think it was like the 3rd day, my mom was like, what are you asking for these autographs for? She thought it was just a cute little thing. But then I was like, oh, Mom, I'm selling these. It's amazing. She's like, you can't do that. So were you hustling like that too?
No, I wasn't. It was whenever I saw something, I always dreamed of like owning things, but I never had the capital or anything. So I did zines, and I did skateboard zines and things like that. So that was the first thing that I created and started doing. Then I started my own skateboard company called Reaction Skateboards. And that was actually after I had gotten into the hardcore thing. So they had artwork that had to do with hardcore and straight edge and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I got serious about, I'm a wallpaper hanger by trade, so that's what I did to support my family when we first got married. But I remember just being like, no, I want to screen print t-shirts because I know what they cost, and I can do this. And I know these people, I can do this. And so, those are the types of businesses, I always wanted to do it, but it didn't actually develop until like later.
Right.
And so that's when I started, my wife tells a story that she came home and I was like, I bought a press. What? You've never mentioned this before? And I'm like, no, I've said this a million times. But the way I remember it is that I borrowed $200. I bought this thing off of eBay when eBay was brand new. And I drove out to Denver and picked it up, and then I just started hustling and doing it that way, and delivering a product and stuff. And the company's just grown, leaps and bounds, obviously, since then. And
right.
Partnered with a lot of different people over the years. So, but it's really hard for me because I can never look at something and not figure out a way to monetize it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
except your band.
No, that was the problem with the band. I love doing t-shirt designs. I just love it. But the thing is like, I love to make records. I love colors of vinyl. Mm-hmm. I love that stuff. I'm a consumer every bit as much as the consumers who buy vinyl and collect it and trade it are too. And that can either be really cool or can suck really bad. For me, it sucked really bad because the other guys in my band were not. Whereas if someone came to us and said, hey, we want you to play this fest, maybe it doesn't sound like that much fun, but it makes this much money. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's play this fest we don't care about because I can take that money and I can make a 7-inch. That's how my brain works, but theirs doesn't work like that. Their brain is like, you're making me play a fest I don't want to play.
Right.
And so a lot of the turmoil I was able to realize, between me and Jess, my anger with those guys or whatever over the years really stemmed from that. You know what I mean? It wasn't until I started Blue Collar and was able to do all these things I wanted to do with the band or whatnot, and I was able to do them and see that they were successful, that, I chilled out. So when we got back in 2005, it was a very different setup. It was not Sean dragging everybody around, hey, we need to play this show, we need to do this, we should talk to this label or whatnot. It was very different. It was like, whatever, you guys decide and majority rules. It was very clean, it was very simple.
to be fair, probably because I identify with the role that you played in Coalesce was 100% the role that I played in all the bands that I was in as well, where you're going to need to have that sort of person with that drive. Because I mean, realistically, if you didn't have that and it was sort of the, democracy rules sort of thing, you wouldn't have had the output that you did, in my estimation. You guys maybe would have had maybe 2 full lengths, maybe an EP, something like that. But, sometimes that sort of,
and sometimes it does, but it really was where a lot of the schism came from.
Sure.
0 and 2 definitely would not have existed. I mean, that record, there's a lot of good stuff on that record that we still like, but that record, we had already broken up and we had signed a contract and we had received money. So it was it was very clear. It's like, we owe a record. We need to go back in the studio. We went back in, not as friends, to make the record. And, and some good things happened and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Who's to say what would and wouldn't happen?
Yeah, no, it's all hypothetical. So it's pointless to say.
But I can absolutely say that I feel like the main problem between the band dynamic really stemmed with me not being on the same page with them. And them wanting to do very fun and very creative and artistic things, and me very much wanting to push the band and see how far it could go, because the thought of being in a band to me, it's just so absurd that I would be in a band, because I don't have any musical background. I don't have, nobody played anything. My first record was only a couple years before I started joining the band. I never was interested in it. When all my buddies, had like Appetite for Destruction and stuff like that, like I could care less. To me, music served only one purpose, and that was background noise for skateboard videos.
Right.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
So me and Dan, I remember specifically having cassette tapes. We would record cassette tapes off of, like Speed Freaks or Streets on Fire, all these Santa Cruz videos, and that's what we would listen to. And so when when iPods and stuff came around later on, I remember making the joke to Dan, is like, man, in my head, I know exactly where every tail popping on an ollie goes. I know where every wheel slide sound and every grind and everything is, because like that's how I learned all of those songs, all the old Descendant songs, and and stuff like that. To me, it's just real wild that that's how it ended up, but
yeah, something that I also think is so distinctly geographically based with the Midwest, the music that comes out of the Midwest. Obviously you could argue that every locale has its own distinct mark, but I think that's something that's so unique about the Midwest in particular, is that there is this real drive to make an impression, because everybody obviously from a cultural perspective goes like, oh yeah, all the cool stuff happens in California or New York or whatever. Obviously you could make an argument that Chicago is also a part of that, but I definitely always got the impression that because you guys started out as a very unconventional band and you only got more unconventional as time went along, that there was some of that weird, like, we're from the Midwest, we're from a big city, but essentially people still have no idea where we actually are living, that there was sort of that element to be like, oh yeah, well, we're making an impression. This is kind of what is happening in the Midwest. A bunch of weird shit.
I do remember back in the day when we did play those shows, it was always so exciting to see people stare at us and have no idea what's going on, because someone would say, oh, it's heavy, something from the cornfield. They would never really say where it's from. The Flyers would always try to make some like silly pun or something like that.
Yeah.
But I remember being like, man, we're gonna fuck this stage up. It's gonna be so rad. And like one of my fondest memories of the band is those early tours. Well, I wouldn't say so much went away, but I would say probably the ones with like Converge going down the East Coast, and Today's the Day, those tours and stuff like that, and just going and like surprising ourselves and surprising people, because no one knew who we were, and just being in the van and being like, did you see that dude that did this? Oh my God, did you see that girl? And this guy said this, and just it's just so fun. It wasn't a chore at all. You know what I mean? We had all this energy from God knows where, and we were doing it,
Yeah.
It's very different than the later years, like now it's just like, guys, I need my back pop so bad and I need some aspirin, because it's such a drain, like what your body can withstand at 20 is so different than at 40,
Oh, sure. Well, That's interesting too, because I definitely always, even at some of the, more wild shows that, I watch you guys play, there was always this element of like, sort of battling against some level of indifference, where it's like you felt this element of like pushing against the crowd, where it's like, okay, like even though you may not understand us for the first couple songs, like we're going to be pummeling you, like we're going to be challenging you to hopefully come along with us, like in the same way that obviously like a opener of a very popular stand-up comedian is like, okay, cool, well, I get to do 20 minutes before the headliner. I got to really push against this. I got to really, do some sort of, leave an impression. And I'm sure there's elements of that within your guys's, like you said, it wasn't a chore. It was just something you guys did.
Oh yeah, you were so pumped. Absolutely, we were just so pumped to get out there.
Yeah.
And even that last tour, God, there's a tour we just did. Who was that with? Oh, Harvey Milk. That tour blew our minds. We had no idea what to expect with them, and I'm just so in love with those guys. They brought that energy out of us again, like in recent years, and they're older guys too, and they're very mellow and they're very different. But when they're on stage, I mean, there's magic happening on stage with those guys, When I listen to the records, I don't think that same magic necessarily, like, I don't think you can tell it's there on the records, but when you see it live, it is something else. And that was like such a cool thing because like, I'm so old and jaded that I'm like, no, I'll never, I've discovered the bands I'm going to discover that are going to be my favorites. Or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like I don't actively go out listening to music. But when we went to them, I was like, I need to buy every single one of this band's records, and I haven't felt that way since like I was a kid, And that was like a real big surprise, I think, for me too, because, we toured with all sorts of bands. We toured with tons of bands, we played all sorts of festivals, where like huge bands played, great bands, underground bands and stuff, but nothing ever hit us like that. So I always thought that was really interesting too. Like there's just definitely something going on with those guys.
They're from the Midwest as well, right?
I don't know.
I don't. For some reason, I was either thinking the Midwest or.
Yeah, I don't think they're maybe Ohio. The bassist is like a chef in Brooklyn, and the drummer I think is from somewhere else because he's like the backup drummer for Dinosaur Jr.
Oh, that's right. Oh yeah, they're originally from Georgia, though, I think.
Okay, that would make sense.
When like you were mentioning, when you obviously, since there was never any idea that Coalesce was going to be a self-sufficient band and like make a living out of it, when in the duration of the band did you obviously decide to start a family, and then Blue Collar Distro obviously was born of you just hustling and continually screen printing as that kind of all went along. But yeah, when did all that stuff kind of come into play?
Well, I think going back to like, for my family unit, I always wanted a family. I knew I wanted a family. Every girl I dated, I wasn't looking for a girlfriend. I was looking for that, kind of future wife. And it's just the way I was built. And I met Chayla at a Coalesce show in Wichita. We just went to Wichita, and she just happened to be there because one of the opening bands, she was friends with one of the opening band's singers or something like that. Mm-hmm. And she was not interested in Coalesce at all, I was like, all right, this is the one for me. You know what I mean? This one will keep me in my place. And we got married really early. So like really towards the beginning of the band, the band was together and broke up so much. It's not like, looking back now, seeing how it all panned out back then, it's like, I thought, when the band ended, it was the end of the world for me at any point. So I was trying to move on with other stuff. I always wanted, always hoped Jess would call me and be like, we're doing it again, but I was moving on with my life too. So I got married while the band was still together. It broke up immediately after we got married. Mm-hmm. There was, we were on hiatus, and we just kind of, went back and forth. So really I've been married for like almost all of the time of the band.
Yeah. What age did you get married?
I got married I was 19 or 20.
Damn, dude, that is a very Midwest belief.
Yeah, for real. So yeah, we're still happily married. We've got 4 kids. We got 2 boys and 2 teenage daughters, and
you're doing
it was just meant to be. But it worked against each other. So there was and they didn't, and the other guys at the band didn't understand. So like I was like, look, I can't go because I can't go work for no money because I have to pay for things like food. I have kids now, or whatever. I don't think the band members understood that. But when we got back together and then they had kids, then it was unspoken, but they understood because they were asking for the same things I was asking for in the beginning. And so, so that's really how we booked our tours, and luckily after 012 went out, we were able to get more than $50 a show,
Right.
so it wasn't unreasonable to be like, hey, we can go on tour for a week and make the same amount of money we would have at our jobs. We're not money ahead, but we got to go out for a week. And that's really what we did. I mean, that's really, what we
Yeah, there was a function behind the design.
Yeah, well, yeah, and really it was just like, if someone asked us to go out with them, we were very clear and upfront. We need this much because this many people, there's not 4 people we're supporting with this money. There's over 12. So, it's like this is the way it is, and if you can't afford that, then we're sorry and good luck. A lot of bands were really gracious. I would say probably the most gracious band we've ever worked with is Converge. Super gracious to us. It was really nice to, for bands like that to let us experience, those types of shows, with them. Years later, being able to play California with a packed house, those types of things. So
yeah. Well, and it's cool too because you come at it from the perspective too, where it's like so many people that obviously do the whole band thing have that as being such a central focus of their lives, which it should be, and that's obviously an important part. But then when the band comes to maybe not even a screeching halt, but when the band starts to wind down, where it's like, okay, it's not self-sufficient anymore, and I have to look for other things to do, becomes like maybe a year or two transition time of just like, what the fuck do I do now?
Yeah.
But you never had to experience that because you were busy building stuff in harmony with the band.
I did at the beginning. Because like like the first major breakup, like right when I first got married, Eric was courting us. It was just such a cool thing that was happening in my life, and it was abruptly ended. And so, I actually tell the story in this documentary called 27 Musicians, I think it's called. It's a documentary about the Kansas City music scene and different people, but they don't use the names of any of the people, but I'm in it on a couple spots. But the need to create and make something was so hard that when we were living in inner city Kansas City at the time during that first breakup, I had absolutely nothing to do. And I took up origami of all things, just to have something to create and get my mind focused on something, because I was just driving nuts. I was pacing the floor. I didn't know what to do. I'd get mad at people because they took my band away from me or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's what I ended up doing. So it took some time. And again, it wasn't. And after that, shortly after that, is when I said, I'm just starting my own business. You know what I mean? And I'm going to pour everything into this. And this new business is going to be my new band, this type of thing, but I'm not going to let it define me. You know what I mean? The idea that, I'm sure you remember this, back in the day, my name would be Sean Coalesce and Dan would be Dan Second Nature. Everyone, whoever did was their last name, when people refer to people and stuff. And like, I think I probably enjoyed that back then in the 90s, but like, when it disappeared, I was just like, I don't ever want to do that again. I'm just Sean, and I just want to disappear and do my thing, you know what I mean, and be happy. And so, there was a transition to learn there, but once the company was in place, it was much easier. It's something falls apart, cool, I'm starting something new, and we would just move forward that way.
Yeah, and so then as Blue Collar Distro started to become obviously your main your job, and as the company started to grow, I always say this to people that like when obviously they start something, your goal is not to become a boss, but then you have to like learn how to become a manager and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I presume that was like an absolutely awful growing pain of you growing the business, I'm sure.
It's very different because the way I wanted maybe someone in the band to respond to me and work with me is exactly how an employee is looking to me to lead them. And I didn't realize that at first. And it's a learning curve, and learning how to not get angry, learning how to vet people, never hire your friends, know who to bring in as a partner of your company and not just hourly. Because, it's always important, it's always better to be partners with someone than competitors. And so we just have we have a lot of philosophies, here. I'm now partners with a guy named Burton Parker and Jim David, who played bass for the Anniversary. And we've had partners that we've bought out over the years and stuff like that as they moved off. It made more sense for us to have it. But taxes, geez. I mean, we got audited one year. That was like one of the worst experiences I ever had. Ooh. one of the most educational experiences ever. So, but yeah, like on a daily basis, and it's true that when you hear like a boss say, look, I may not be digging the ditch, but I'm mentally exhausted from looking 10 steps down the road, you know what I mean, and making sure that you have a ditch to dig. And that's very much what it's like here, and especially as it's grown more and we're doing bigger and bigger projects. So,
well, yeah, that's which is awesome that you've been able to like been there since the start, but then be able to watch it, permeate and grow, and obviously get all that horrible stuff thrown at you in order to be like, okay, well, now I know how to do that.
yeah, I tell you, and I tell you that the best teaching or the best education is losing money. You lose $1,000, you will never make that mistake again.
Yeah.
You lose $500, you will never make that mistake again. Someone telling you something, isn't as effective as seeing your bank account, and not being able to do payroll or something like that. Not that we've ever had that problem, but like we've lost money over the years of not checking our UPS bill close enough, not checking our weight dimensions, just minutia, and it's always amazing how quickly you can lose $500, just by not paying attention to one silly, little thing,
Yeah.
So, but that's why I love having partners, because all three of us are looking at it. We're all vetting each other all the time. We're all keeping each other accountable. And to me, that's the best way to do it. And we're also really laid back here. So
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, because I presume you all kind of come from similar backgrounds in the sense that I do think that there's something intrinsically and a shorthand understanding of like people that kind of are cut from the same cloth in regards to being creators of like independent art in some capacity. It like that DIY nature, is like cliched as that term is. You can immediately plug yourself into a situation, just be like, oh yeah, like I know what you're talking about. You don't need to. Oh, where do I begin to? Well, like, I don't know. That's like punk and hardcore. I don't know. That doesn't mean anything. And it's like, oh, where do I begin? But when you have that level of understanding, it's easier to, I guess, get stuff done, because you both have, played in front of 10 people in, Wichita or whatever.
Sure. You're right.
The last thing I want to hit on was you kind of alluded to it earlier in regards to the notion that you have teenage daughters, you have children that are growing up within within your supervision, and you having the experiences of what you've had in regards to not only being involved in independent culture, but you still are like you're still a person that is active within, for lack of a better term, like youth culture, and having those sort of like punk rock sensibilities and all that stuff. Like is the parenting part just really kind of, mind bending for you to be like, oh dude, like I need to discipline you for this, but I would have done the same exact thing, and like certain levels of understanding that might not have been afforded to you.
You can never tell your kids that you would have done it that way. Yeah. You can't ever do that. You have to just, well, here's how, we kind of have like two families. I have a 16 and a 14-year-old girl. Though and then we waited several years. We didn't think we were going to have any more kids. And then now we have a 7 and a 5-year-old boy. So we have 2 older girls and 2 little boys. The 2 older girls, we homeschool all 4 of them. The 2 older girls are doing great. They excel. Reagan, my oldest, she is hopelessly in love with roller derby, and I'm a roller derby dad that has her twice a week in Topeka doing these bouts and training and stuff like that every year. And Hazel is a stage makeup artist at 14. It's so weird that this is a thing. I didn't realize how important this was, but she's been recruited at 14 to work on like the main stage at the Lord's Art Center. from just taking like a silly little class that I paid for her to do. So like they like have their things. They're at 14 and 16. They've already planned out their lives. They know exactly who they're going to marry. You know what I mean? They've got this, and they're good kids. They're not boy crazy. They got good head on their shoulders. So we did a really good job with them. My boys, on the other hand, are total terrors. They are just absolutely bonkers. They need constant discipline. You know what I mean? And they need tons of love too. You know, so we are just always on top of them. You know, and it's like everyone is parenting the boys sometimes. You know, because they're so full of it, and it's just such an interesting dynamic because the stuff that my boys do, my girls never did. You know what I mean? It's like my girls never pulled their pants down and peed on an Earth Day parade rolling by in front of them, you know, and beside everybody. These are not the things that my girls did, but these are the things that my boys do.
Right.
You know, I mean, they just think they're so hilarious. They just, you know, and some of the stuff they do is hilarious, but it's just so hard not to laugh at them. You know, you just have to be stern, you know, and just not give them an inch, you know.
Yeah.
But you talk to, and it's just different too because my girls, you know, they have little DSs and they played them, and when they were done with them, then they put them up. My boys are absolutely obsessed with Minecraft and Legos and building things, which is awesome. So I wanted to foster that. But something about the video game system, Ozzy, you know, he's 5. He would tell me this. He says, "Dad, I play the game so much, sometimes I can't tell if I'm in the game or not." And that's like, I was like, what? How often are you playing it? They only get to play it on Saturday, but they play too much and they get too enveloped in it. And one day, Ozzy and Max got in a fight, and he threw the controller and smashed the TV screen. And I never did anything like that. Man, my dad would fucking kill me if I busted a TV back in the day. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like to me, I was almost like thankful. I was like, oh, you know, this is disappearing now, guys. You know, kiss it goodbye. And they cried and they mourned over it for a couple weeks, but they have like come back. You know what I mean? To where, you know, so I always thought that was really interesting. I always heard people complain about video games, right brain, this and that. I don't believe that, but I believe some kids just can't control like how into it. Yeah,
sure.
The impulse or whatever. And my boys are 2 of those people, you know. And so it was like it's just fascinating, you know. It's just how different they are.
Your experience is also unique in regards to, like you were alluding to earlier, with the idea that like you always wanted a family, and you know, since you got married at a very early age, relatively speaking to most people that are involved in, you know, independent music, it's like, you know, most people in independent music, they're like, once they hit 30, they're like, all right, maybe I'll think about settling down. And then maybe in 5 years I'll have kids. So you definitely have a more unique experience because you had that vision, you know, earlier on in your life as opposed to later on. So, I
can't imagine trying to keep up with a little kid at 40. You know what I mean? At 5, you know. But no. But I mean, to me, it's like it's all about the kids. You know what I mean? You know, if I follow her from a heart attack tomorrow, you know, honestly, who cares about Coalesce? It's like those kids are my legacy. You know what I mean? So if you look at it that way, I mean, they're like so important to me. You know.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that I love them so much, but you know, I mean, it's like, so I want to put everything into them. I want them to do cool stuff. You know, I want them to, you know, I don't want them to look at things. I don't want them to color inside the lines and do all those things, but I also want them to know when to be cool and when to cut loose. Because right now they don't know how to cut loose, you know. But yeah, I mean, and honestly, it's the hardest thing in the world. Parenting is like the worst because you have no clue if what you're doing is right or wrong. You know what I mean? And you know, Reagan gets in a fight with us or something, she's mad at us. She'll let us know what we did wrong. You know?
Right.
Yeah, and it's like, oh man, that hurts so bad. You have no idea how much that things, because you know, we had no clue. I mean, we were so young, you know. And even looking at our pictures, I'm just like, dude, who let us take those babies home? We're like babies ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, just looking at the pictures of us, it's just too young, you know.
Yeah, no. Well, I think that's a very sweet notion in regards to, like you said, because people always reflect on, you know, legacy. Like once you hit a certain age, there's definitely that element of like, oh, what impact have I made even on a small scale? But then, yeah, like it's not, you're not going to reflect on like, rad, I put out 7 LPs and a few,
Yeah.
EPs, you'd be like, no, like I have
I
these.
did colored vinyl. I did this record on colored vinyl with a hand numbered this. Who cares?
Right.
It's on eBay for $1. So it's like, yeah, it's right. And I feel like anybody in a band, like or a singer, or someone who's really pushing their band, if they say they don't think like that, to some degree, I think they're lying because I mean you are building this thing, and man, it is so cool. Like a band, it's so cool to see the lives you touch, the people who contact you. Oh, your band got me through high school. I'm sure every band member's heard that from someone and whatnot, and it feels cool. And you think you've created something, and I think every band member should be proud of that and stuff. But when it gets down to it, I'm in the unique position that my band hasn't. Well, it's not unique, but I'm in the positions where my band hasn't put anything out. So when someone mentions Coalesce, and more often than not, you hear Coalesce. Who's Coalesce?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's been long enough. It's been the generation. We haven't been around for those other generations. So people think of us as an old band or something like that. So you see like how fleeting that is.
Yeah.
Now, there's always the hope that someone will discover you later on down the road. Like they did. Oh, like some of these awesome documentaries that are coming out where they find these amazing bands that kicked so much ass but didn't get major recognition back in the day.
Yeah.
The Sugar Man, and then also
Death.
Death. Yeah, the band called Death. Those, I mean, that would be like the coolest thing too. I think any band would be so stoked to have that happen to them too. But it's not a reality. That's like a lottery draw. You know what I mean? So like your legacy really is your kids. You know what I mean? And it's always interesting because I always tell my dad that. It's like, hey, you want to see your boys, right? This is it. He's like, yeah, okay. It's like, what, really? It's like, this is it. They want to play football. They want to do the things that I could have cared less about as a kid, with you and stuff, So sometimes dudes just need reminding of that too, I think, So.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you hanging out, Sean, and thank you for walking me through all that and all the different mentalities. I wasn't expecting you to be closed off at all, but you were very open, and I appreciate that.
Oh, no problem.
So there you have it. That is my conversation with Sean. Thank you for listening. Like I said, at the very end, when he was talking about his legacy, like what he is proud of, and he's like, Coalesce doesn't mean shit. It's like my kids. And it's like for a person, no matter at what stage in your life, to kind of realize that the finite nature of the creative output that we put in there, it's awesome, and it's so cool that people can use that as a touchstone. But there's obviously a lot of other tangible things that you can do in your life that are just so rewarding, for lack of a better term. And of course, my perception is skewed because I myself have a 3-year-old son. And, if the podcast and all the bands I played in and all the music industry stuff I've done goes away and I have my son, I'm like, that's successful. So it was just a really cool thing to hear from a person to just, like Sean, to put that out there. And so it was cool. Anyways, the producer and confidant and friend of the show, Tom Richfield, as always, he does a stellar job, and I'm paying him now, and that feels so good to just give him some money. Here, dude, here's some eternal gratitude in the form of financial compensation. So because of you, the listener, I am able to do that, and also my job and my wife agreeing to let me do that. So anyways, until next week, be safe, everybody. And here's a little tease. We have no theme month during July. But there is some really, really exciting things coming up for the show. There's some great stuff. Not only the guests, but some business, behind-the-scenes stuff that's happening. So I can't wait to announce it to all of you. It'll be exciting. But, the guest next week is Sasha Dunable? Yeah. I always do that. I have to say a person's last name like 10 times before I feel like I have a grasp at it. But Sasha plays in a band called Intronaut, and he also does his own guitar company. I'm doing a ton of interviews today at Warped Tour, so who knows what you'll get. You'll get some cool stuff. I know that for sure. So anyways, until next week, be safe, everybody.